Unlawful assembly. Unlawful assembly. In the Pakistan Penal Code, PPC, of 1860, the offence of unlawful assembly is defined in section 141. According to this section, when 5 or more individuals assemble with the intention of committing a crime, using force or violence against another person or property, or engaging in conduct that disrupts public peace, they are considered to be part of an unlawful assembly. Section 141 further provides that if the members of an unlawful assembly, after being commanded by a public servant to disperse, continue to stay together and engage in the activities mentioned above, they are liable to be charged with the offence of being a member of an unlawful assembly under Section 142. Essential elements of unlawful assembly. The essential elements of an unlawful assembly, as defined by Pakistan Penal Code, PPC, Section 141, can be summarized under the following headings. 4. Knowledge and intent. To establish an unlawful assembly, it is essential to demonstrate that the participants had knowledge of the common object and intended to pursue it. Mere presence at the gathering is not sufficient to establish guilt. The prosecution must prove that the individuals were aware of the unlawful nature of the assembly and consciously participated in it. V. Resistance to disperse. If a public servant commands the assembly to disperse in order to prevent the commission of an offence or to maintain public order, the failure of the individuals to disperse is a crucial element. Section 141 of the PPC specifies that an assembly becomes unlawful when the members, upon receiving such a command, refuse to disperse and continue their activities. Punishments. Here are sections that are related to the punishment of unlawful assembly. Section 143. Being a member of an unlawful assembly. Section 143 deals with the offence of being a member of an unlawful assembly. If a person is found guilty of being a member of a group that has gathered with the intention to commit a crime, use force or violence against others, or disturb public peace, they can be charged under this section. Punishment. The punishment for being a member of an unlawful assembly can include imprisonment for up to 6 months, a fine, or both. Section 144. Joining unlawful assembly armed with a deadly weapon. Section 144 addresses the offence of joining an unlawful assembly while armed with a deadly weapon. If a person joins a group that is unlawfully assembled and carries a dangerous weapon, they can be charged under this section. Punishment. The punishment for joining an unlawful assembly while armed with a deadly weapon can include imprisonment for up to 2 years, a fine, or both. Section 145. Joining or continuing in an unlawful assembly, knowing it has been commanded to disperse. Section 145 pertains to the offence of joining or remaining in an unlawful assembly after being ordered to disperse by a public servant. If members of an unlawful assembly are commanded by a public servant to disperse, but they refuse to do so and continue with their activities, they can be charged under this section. Punishment. The punishment for joining or continuing in an unlawful assembly despite being ordered to disperse shall be imprisonment of either description for a term which may extend to 2 years, a fine, or both. When it becomes riot. Under the Pakistan Penal Code, PPC, an assembly becomes a riot when the members of an unlawful assembly engage in violent and disorderly conduct. The specific provisions related to rioting are covered in Section 146 of the PPC. Here's an explanation of when an assembly becomes a riot. Rioting, Section 146. An assembly becomes a riot when the members use force or violence or engage in riotous and disorderly conduct. The key elements for an assembly to be considered a riot are: use of force or violence. The assembly members actively employ physical force or violence. This can involve acts such as physically attacking others, damaging property, or engaging in violent confrontations. Riotous and disorderly conduct. The conduct of the assembly is characterized by chaos, disturbance, or disorder. This can include creating a hostile or threatening. The PPC provides provisions for punishments related to rioting in sections 147 and 148. Essentials of riot. Here are the essential elements of rioting, as discussed in section 146 of the Pakistan Penal Code, explained under headings for clarity. I. Unlawful assembly. Rioting occurs when there is an unlawful assembly. This refers to a gathering of 5 or more individuals who have a common objective to commit a crime, use force or violence against others, or disturb public peace. 2. Use of force or violence. One of the essential elements of rioting is the use of force or violence by the members of the unlawful assembly. This involves actively employing physical force or violence against people or property. Acts such as physically attacking others, damaging property, or engaging in violent confrontations would constitute the use of force or violence. 3. Tumultuous and disorderly conduct. Rioting is characterized by tumultuous and disorderly conduct. This means that the conduct of the assembly is chaotic and disruptive, and creates an environment of disorder. It involves actions that disturb public peace, cause fear or panic, or disrupt the normal functioning of society. The conduct can include shouting, yelling, throwing objects, inciting violence, or engaging in any behavior that leads to disorderliness. 4. Collective responsibility. All members of the unlawful assembly may be held collectively responsible for the offense of rioting, regardless of their individual level of involvement or participation in specific acts of violence. The focus is on the collective conduct of the assembly and its impact on public peace and order. V. Intent. To establish the offense of rioting, it is important to establish that the members of the unlawful assembly had the intention to engage in riotous behavior. This refers to a conscious and deliberate decision to participate in acts of violence, use force, or disrupt public peace. Punishment for rioting. Here's a detailed explanation of the punishments for rioting as outlined in sections 147 and 148 of the Pakistan Penal Code. 1. Section 147 Punishment for rioting. Section 147 addresses the offence of rioting, which involves using force or violence by the members of an unlawful assembly. The key points to note are: punishment. If the members of an unlawful assembly engage in rioting, the punishment can be up to 2 years of simple imprisonment, a fine, or both. Elements. For an assembly to be considered a riot, there must be a minimum of 5 individuals who use force or violence or engage in tumultuous and disorderly conduct. The focus is on the conduct of the assembly, which disrupts public peace and creates a chaotic or threatening environment. Collective responsibility. It's important to understand that all members of the unlawful assembly may be held collectively responsible for the offence of rioting, regardless of their individual level of involvement or participation in specific acts of violence. 2. Section 148 Punishment for armed rioting. Section 148 deals with the offence of armed rioting, which involves members of an unlawful assembly being armed with deadly weapons. Here are the key details. Punishment. If the members of an unlawful assembly are armed with deadly weapons during the rioting, the punishment can be either of the following: imprisonment of either description for a term that can extend up to 3 years, a fine, or both. Armed with deadly weapons. The use of deadly weapons, such as firearms or other instruments capable of causing serious harm or death, during the commission of rioting intensifies the severity of the offence and leads to enhanced punishment.